Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, reality check. Getting near the end of my reading of A Monument to the End of Time, written by myself and the late great Vincent Bridges. We are now on part 4, the conclusion of the book. And we have a quote from Fulcanelli from Mystery of the Cathedrals. I know myself that the goddess Isis is the mother of all things, and that she alone can bestow revelation and initiation. Right. Answered questions and answered questions and questions answered. This is chapter 11, section 1, the transformation of time. When we began our investigation, we had no idea of the bizarre pathways down which it would lead us. We started with the series of mysteries, the mystery of Fulcanelli, the mystery of the cathedrals, the mystery of alchemy, and its connections with Chaleism and eschatology, and so on. The closer we came to solving these mysteries, the greater the overall mystery became. We can sum this greater mystery up in a few words. Who could have known this much? And knowing this much, why choose such an incredibly indirect method to reveal it? First, there is the mystery of Fulcanelli. As we have seen, the best suggestions that he was Champagne or Canciole, or even a committee of occultists, falls short of explaining the depth of his erudition and the strength of his evident personality. It also completely fails to explain the mysterious extra chapter in the second edition, the cyclic cross at Hendaye. Canciole shows no sign of knowing anything about Hendaye until after his visit to Fulcanelli in the Pyrenees in the 1950s. Champagne and Dujol, the supposed other members of the committee, were long dead by then, but even Jules Boucher's article seems to be derived from an independent source, a source which suggests that there was a real Fulcanelli. An in-depth textual analysis of Mystery of Cathedrals reveals evidence that Fulcanelli was born and educated in the 18th century. He tells us that during his student years, he watched a house in Paris being built. The construction of the house he mentioned was finished by 1765, leaving us to wonder if Fulcanelli was joking. However, several comments later in the text indicate that Fulcanelli was familiar with Notre Dame de Paris before it was damaged by the French Revolution, including information that is lost to scholars. Could it really have been 200 years old when Mystery of the Cathedrals was published? As for the mystery of the cathedrals itself, we found that Fulcanelli's explication of its symbolism, while seemingly radical, was in fact more accurate and insightful than a shelf full of academic works. Somehow Fulcanelli understood the inner meaning and faith of an age that is long dead and whose ideas are usually ridiculed and dismissed. Through Fulcanelli's eyes, we are presented with a view of the Middle Ages as a vibrant, hopeful era, filled with new ideas and bursting at the seams with practical spirituality. Fulcanelli defines the cathedrals, especially Notre Dame de Paris, as instruments of a spiritual evolution fueled by the application of astro-alchemical principles. As we have seen, this perspective is incorporated within the very structure of the building itself. Even the connection between alchemy and the apocalypse becomes clear as we stand with Fulcanelli and gaze on the great porch of the Last Judgment, the middle portal of Notre Dame de Paris' 13th century facade. Let me show you that. This is the front porch of the Last Judgment. Beautiful, isn't it? From the connection between alchemy and the apocalypse becomes okay. The quintessential image of alchemy and the ladder of adeptship can be found on the base of the central pillar, and the roundel images that Fulcanelli uses to delineate the Kabbalistic path of return can be found on the left and right sides of the portal. With great subtlety, Fulcanelli is telling us that the Last Judgment is based on the astro-alchemical process, and that the designers of the Philosopher's Church were aware of this fact. Following this thread of alchemical apocalypse led us back to the first century CE Alexandria and the Gnostic mysteries that emerged from the ruins of ancient cultures such as Egypt. At the core of this Gnostic current was a belief in the Great Return, a form of eschatology that, when would merge with Judaic stream to become Christianity, created the idea of Chaleism. It was Chaleism, an obscure but not heretical belief within Christianity, that preserved the secret and then revealed it in the thronging symbolism of Notre Dame's Great Porch. The cornerstone of the greater mystery is the cross of Hendaye, a true monument to the end of time. From this simple, inelegant, and obscure monument, Fulcanelli derives his warning that our hemisphere will be tried by fire, and the message of hope that there is a place of refuge. Our detailed decoding revealed that the monument does indeed suggest the mechanisms of the double catastrophe. It also demonstrates the ancient illuminated science of astroalchemy, creating an astronomical correct cube of space within the projected tree of life. This illuminated astronomy makes use of sophisticated alignments between the galactic core and the solar system's angular momentum due to its radial energy flow. It also creates a pattern that can be used to precisely locate our solar system in intergalactic space. A glimpse of the greater mystery can be had by contemplating the source of this advanced cosmological knowledge. The cross of Hendaye also uses this ancient illuminated astronomy to predict the timing of the double catastrophe. Its symbology reveals a season of destruction from summer solstice to winter solstice. As we have seen, the INRI above the starburst on the eastern face of the cross demonstrates how closely Christianity is related to the mystery of the Last Judgment. However, given the interpretation for INRI of Isis Natura Regina Ineffabilis, or Isis, the ineffable queen of nature, and Isis, in Regina Ineffabilis, or Isis, the ineffable queen of nature, and Isis' close association with the center of the galaxy, then we might adjust our understanding of Christianity to reflect a more Egyptian perspective. Perhaps the stories of the birth of a savior are symbolic references to a transformative time. Horus is born to avenge his father Osiris's death at the hands of his uncle Set. Then this strange familial motif is carried throughout literature and legends such as Shakespeare's Hamlet, the Greek Oedipus stories, the myths of Jason, and dozens more, including the Lion King. What if these myths reflect the conditions in the sky thousands of years ago at the time of the last catastrophe? And what if these myths are about to reappear in the skies of our own time? We can see this most clearly when we contemplate Chaleism's source, the New Jerusalem of St. John's Revelation. In chapter 21, verse 10, St. John tells us that the angel showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. This suggests that the holy city is a pattern in the heavens first before it becomes a reality here. Since the holy city, as the angel reveals in 21:16, is a vast cube, then we can easily see this as the cube of space. The millennial moment, the climax of the end of time, is the moment when the cube of space becomes the holy city of the New Jerusalem. This happens, of course, when the celestial markers, sun, moon, planets, edge, and center of the galaxy, assume the appropriate mythological positions once every 13,000 years. At that moment, the cube of space becomes animated and the heavenly city descends. The cross of Hendaye tells us that we are soon to be in that moment. John Michel, in his seminal work, City of Revelation, demonstrates that the sacred geometry of the New Jerusalem provides a link between various sacred structures such as Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid, and the basic ratio of the moon's orbit around the earth. Taking this as a clue, we can imagine that the cube of the New Jerusalem forms within the sphere defined by the moon's orbit. He would, of course, be aligned. It would, of course, be aligned to the larger cube of space defined by the celestial events. This cube within a cube image is a 3D representation of a hypercube, the 4D structure formed from the cube of space by projecting the tree of life onto its surface. The phase of the mythological drama, the death of Osiris, the birth of Horus, and his triumph, like the phases of the alchemical transformation, represent the manifestations of the different celestial events forming the New Jerusalem cube. Perhaps all the horrors of our century are the result of the cosmological alchemy in which the transfiguration of time triggers the other transformations. Is it possible that we're being pushed by cosmological events towards an extinction or enlightenment as a species? Seen in this light, alchemy looks like the core unitary philosophy of the ancient sacred science. Our earliest alchemical texts reveal the three-in-one nature of the process, with which Fulcanelli, in the clearest statement of practical alchemy ever written, completely agrees. Alchemy is the combination of inner and outer transformation, coordinated by the transformational quality of time itself. Following this thread led us to the frontiers of modern science and theoretical physics. The answer we found not only provided a rational physics for transmutation, but the cosmological implications of that physics supplied a description for Fulcanelli's double catastrophe. Dr. Laviolette's work suggests that the mechanism of the double catastrophe could be the arrival of a galactic core superwave, which would push dust into the sun, causing a massive coronal discharge. This double catastrophe is loosely tied to the precessional cycles which the ancient illuminated astronomy measured it by galactic core alignments. Perhaps the alignments, such as depicted on Hendaye, occur before the arrival of the superwave and its destructive effects, as a kind of warning. The signs and portents of revelation promises in the sky. It could also be a window of opportunity for profound change, perhaps even the moment of ascension or the mass attainment of the diamond body, an immortal light body. However we interpret the cosmic mythology, it is the oddly divided Latin inscription on the Hendaye cross which provides us with important clues. It confirms the timing of the catastrophe and then most significantly points to the location of the place of refuge. If we pass Fulcanelli's test and learn to search for the missing refuge within the space of the misplaced S, we find a precise location, Cusco, Peru. The Incas analog to the center of the galaxy, their navel of the world. Following this clear message, we stumbled onto the original location of Atlantis, our lost pre-catastrophe global civilization. Well, at least part of Atlantis. Ancient traditions tell us of a culture hero, Viracocha, who emerged from the center of the world and gathered the remnants of the civilization together at Tiwanaku, one of the ruined cities of Atlantis. Perhaps this memory of the survivors of the last catastrophe and their determination to rebuild their culture. The mysterious Romande Stela, found in the Peruvian highlands and dating back to at least 1000 BCE, depicts a Viracocha-type shaman. In this image, the Viracocha shaman is shown with his internal centers aligned with the planetary equivalents while engaging in surveying stellar alignments with a pair of serpent-entwined staffs. When we stand back and look at this vast panorama of connections and correspondences, the conclusions, bizarre as they seem, are obvious. A high civilization existed in the Andes around 13,000 years ago. It was perhaps even far beyond our current level, maybe even in contact with other civilizations in our local galactic neighborhood. A catastrophe destroyed their culture, except for scattered, isolated pockets of survivors. It is possible that these survivors were actually immortal beings who had attained a light body before the wave of destruction arrived. When, whatever their exact nature, these beings worked for thousands of years to restart civilization from the ground up, perhaps literally. The Viracocha shaman and his surviving staff suggest that part of the revival had to do with reestablishing a kind of geomantic structure aligned to the stars, the planets, and other galactic locations, which encouraged life and consciousness. Given that the geometry of both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid are related to the New Jerusalem cube, which is now forming in the sky, we might expect that the idea of an Earth grid, Plato's spherical icosahedron of triangles, would provide more confirmation. And indeed it does. As we saw in chapter 6, a mirror image of the structure of Notre Dame de Paris's choir forms a perfect icosahedron grid pattern. Even more intriguing, the long lay through central England, which passes through Stonehenge and Avebury, two ancient temples complete in Avebury's case with serpents, also passes through Tiwanaku. Most curiously of all, however, is the occurrence of an essentially interactive phenomena along this lay across England, the crop circles. I'm not going to talk about the crop circles because I know who makes them, so I'm not going to bring that in. And so we come back once more to the greater mystery. Who could have known this much? If Fulcanelli truly is an immortal, a very long-lived individual, it is possible that he could have learned some pieces of the puzzle during his lifetime. But how did he come by his longevity? In a life of 200 years, is it possible to discover many of these secrets? Simply living that long shows us that he discovered a key piece of the puzzle early on, say in the years prior to the French Revolution. For that to be true, it means that some group or society existing at the time had all this information and more, and were able to pass it on by initiation or some other process to Fulcanelli. The use of Occam's razor suggests that it's safer to believe in the existence of such a group than to believe that a single individual rediscovered it all. We have the evidence of Fulcanelli himself on this point. He's clearly bound by his oath to this group and is constrained by it in what he tells us. This suggests that the answer to the question of why such an indirect manner of revelation is one of oaths and secrecy. Fulcanelli then had superiors to whom he was accountable. If such a society in fact exists, then we might ask why Fulcanelli spoke as plainly as he did, particularly in the Hendaye chapter. In that question just might lie the key to the greater mystery. All right, so I believe that that's the end of that chapter. I believe there's just 2 more chapters left. Monument to the End of Time. I'm Jay Weidner, and thanks for watching, and I don't really have much more to add. Thanks.